Has former President Donald Trump gotten himself into hot water with the GOP? Well, in a speech this week, the former president criticized Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the wake of the Hamas attacks in Israel. Trump accused Netanyahu of letting us down in 2020 before the United States killed a top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani.
Trump also said yesterday that Israel, quote, wouldn't have had to be prepared, end quote, if he were in the White House, and also referred to Israel's defense minister as a, quote, jerk.
You know, Hezbollah is very smart. They're all very smart. The press doesn't like when they say it. You know, I said that President Xi of China, 1.4 billion people, he controls it with an iron fist. I said he's a very smart man. They killed me the next day. I said he was smart. What am I going to say? But Hezbollah, they're very smart. And they have a national defense minister or somebody saying, I hope Hezbollah doesn't attack us from the north. So the following morning they attacked. They might not have been doing it, but if you listen to this jerk, you would attack from the north because he said that's our weak spot. I'll never forget that Bibi Netanyahu let us down. That was a very terrible thing, I will say that. And so when I see sometimes the intelligence, you talk about the intelligence or you talk about some of the things that went wrong over the last week, they've got to straighten it out because they're fighting potentially a very big force. They're fighting potentially Iran. And when they have people saying the wrong things, everything they say is being digested by these people because they're vicious and they're smart. And boy, are they vicious because nobody's ever seen the kind of sight that we've seen.
According to Hill reporting, the comments have already opened up Trump to criticism from the right, including 2024 GOP candidate Ron DeSantis, who wrote on X this week, terrorists have murdered at least 1,200 Israelis and 22 Americans and are holding more hostage. So it is absurd that anyone, much less someone running for president, would choose now to attack our friend and ally Israel, much less praise Hezbollah terrorists as, quote, very smart. As president, I will stand with Israel and treat terrorists like the scum that they are. Here with us to discuss is political reporter at The Hill, Julia Manchester. Thanks for being with us, Julia.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Good morning.
Good morning.
So Trump tends to word salad on issues such as this with little sprinklings of current events and what's going on. I think possibly his supporters don't understand the issue from what he said there. What do you make of Trump's comments as a whole?
Yeah, so some Republicans I talked to said, look, it wasn't the best choice of words and point to how he's called other, controversial figures, dangerous figures or adversaries to the United States smart, like Vladimir Putin, for example. But they also point out that he says they're smart and that they're not stupid. They're cunning. They know what they're doing. And a group like Hezbollah understands that. And he understands that a group like Hezbollah is a threat. At the same time, though, it does open it up to criticism from his critics because of the timing of all of this. You know, this was not even a week after those horrific terror attacks in Israel. And then, of course, in the same breath, he did criticize Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and, sort of said, if I were president of the United States right now, this wouldn't have happened. So, I think there's some, questions as to whether this was the best timing, but I don't think at this point anyone thinks, Donald Trump is actually praising Hezbollah. It was just a bad choice of words, bad timing. And then another actually viewpoint I've heard on this is that, Trump may be even looking at this from a strategic lens and trying to appeal to more moderate voters in the United States who may look at a leader like Benjamin Netanyahu, who is quite conservative and not popular with liberals in Israel and the United States and around the world, and see it as Trump sort of trying to appeal to those moderate voters, but still really getting a lot of attention and backlash from his Republican opponents.
Julia, I want to unpack something that the former president stated in his remarks. He stated that Benjamin Netanyahu, quote, let us down. What exactly was he talking about?
Sure, Michael, he's referring to how, back in 2020, when the United States was launching an attack to kill the Iranian general or top Iranian general, Qasem Soleimani, that Israel did not participate. There might also be some more baggage underneath some of the Trump's venting towards Netanyahu, though he didn't reference this. Remember, Trump has also criticized Netanyahu for congratulating President Joe Biden for winning the 2020 presidential election. So this isn't the first time he's criticized the Israeli prime minister, but it is notable because there are so many similarities between Trump and Netanyahu, and they do have very close ties. Trump worked very closely with Netanyahu to establish the Abraham Accords, which essentially worked to normalize relations between the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Israel. So they've had a relationship before, but this is Trump once again, lashing out at him.
So Trump has a tendency, I mentioned earlier, sprinklings of truth. To mention Iran in this case is to bring in a lot of the rhetoric we've been hearing, a lot of conspiracy theories on the right, that the money given to Iran to release hostages was used in the attack of Hamas in Gaza. And clearly, we've heard from Anthony Blinken on this, we've heard from the White House on this, that Qatar actually, as a part of the deal, holds the strings to these funds and has agreed to block Iran from accessing these funds, and they were not used. What do you make of Trump just mentioning Iran at all? Is he trying to speak to some of those sentiments and anxieties?
I think he is. And we do know that Trump has hit Biden on the issue of Iran even before Biden was president, going back to the Obama administration, with that administration's work to establish the Iran nuclear deal with Tehran. So that's not necessarily surprising to me that he's going after Iran at this point. It's been sort of an attacking point for the former president. And I would expect him to continue to voice concerns and attacks on the administration about the $6 billion, even though there's no evidence that it was used in these terror attacks and that it's still frozen. You are seeing Democrats, have to continue to go vocally on the defense about it, because it is something that Republicans and conservatives and are very much, promoting and messaging. You're even seeing some Democrats say, it's maybe time to, back away from that money and keep it frozen for the time being. So it's an attack point that I think we'll expect to see from Trump and other Republicans, despite the fact you've heard so many Democrats pushing back on it.
Julia, I want to ask you a two-part question here. I mean, Trump made the statements when he was attacking the military official in Israel that it just doesn't make sense to say, don't attack us in the north because that's where we're weaker, and then you get an attack from the north. And for the layperson, the average voter, they may look at that and say, well, Trump actually has a pretty good point. Why state or articulate your strategic weaknesses publicly on air to then give your adversary the opportunity to attack you where you're weak? And then two, do you think this is actually going to impact Trump in politically in any regard? I don't know if you're reporting, if you've had the opportunity to talk to Republican voters, but how do they see this?
Yeah, look, on the strategic part of this, so the first part of your question, look, that's absolutely what Trump was doing, and sort of, offering some criticism to how Israel handled that and their response to that. I think what garnered a lot of attention from those comments, though, is when he called the Israeli defense minister a jerk. So there might have been some constructive criticism in there, but there was that phrasing, that name calling in there as well, that raised a lot of eyebrows. In terms of how this impacts Trump politically, look, of course, we're going to see Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis go after him on this. It's very easy to. It's easy for the Biden administration, the president, to go after him on this as well, because, it arguably was not the best timing, not the best choice of words. That being said, though, going forward, I don't think this will particularly impact him with Republican primary voters. Right before I was chatting with you guys, I was looking at a Fox News poll that was released earlier this week, and it shows Trump with 59% of support from the Republican primary, followed by Ron DeSantis at 13% and Nikki Haley at 10%. He really seems at this point, and a lot can change, so I'm not going to say this is a set in stone, but it really seems at this point that he is very close to sort of locking the nomination in at this point. So it's hard to see how this impacts him, especially when we know that voters don't tend to vote on foreign policy. However, if foreign policy starts impacting the economy or domestic issues here, that could potentially change.
I think you make it a good point here to focus on the language. Trump might call the defense minister a jerk, but someone with a background in foreign policy might say, we're really critical of his actions. And Trump might call Hezbollah smart. Someone else might say they've been very strategic in the region. The sentiment, I think, to most voters is the same. But thank you so much for joining us. We have more Rising right after this.